Hello Year 10, this video is on multiplying and dividing algebraic fractions. So it just works the same as if you have any normal fraction and you multiply them together. So if you multiply, you just got to remember, you multiply the numerator and then you multiply the denominator. So you multiply across, you don't cross multiply or anything like that. Just remember, multiply your numerators together and then multiply your denominators. Now when you're dividing fractions, the best way is if you look at this blue example on the right here, we've got a over b divided by c over d. And that equals a over b times d over c. So what we do there is we change that divide to a multiply, then we flip the second fraction. Now you've got to remember you have to flip the second fraction, not the first. And then we just multiply across as we did previously. So multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators. And that's really all you need to know when we're doing these types of questions. So we've got 6 examples, I think, to have a go through and we'll see how you go. So the first example, we've got 3 over m times m over 6. So nice and easily just a multiplication. So we multiply the numerators together and then we multiply the denominators, which will give us 3m over 6m. And then from there we look, can we simplify? Yep, because it's all multiplying. The m's will cancel and we've got 3 divided by 6, which is a half. Now for b, we've got 3 over m times m squared. Now the main thing to remember here is m squared is the same as m squared over 1 if we were to write it as a fraction. So please remember that, because a really common mistake that happens in exams is when you have a fraction just times by something on its own, like the m squared, people multiply the numerator and the denominator by m squared, which is incorrect. So just remember m squared as a fraction is m squared over 1, and then we just multiply across, so we'll have 3 times m squared over m times 1, which will give us 3m squared over m, and then we can simplify. So the 3 will stay, we've got m squared on the top and m on the bottom, 1 common on the top and the bottom, so we'll just be left with 1m on the top of the fraction. Now for part C, we've got 4 over n divided by 2 over n squared. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get rid of that divide. So remember, the first fraction stays as it is. We change it to a times and then we flip the second fraction, so it becomes n squared over 2. And then we just multiply. So we'll have 4 times n squared over n times 2, and that will give us 4n squared over 2n, and then we can just simplify. 4 divided by 2 is 2, n squared divided by n is just n. Okay, let's have a look at D. So D is very similar to part C. We have 3 over a divided by 2. This time we've got to divide though, so remember that 2 is the same as 2 over 1. So if we're changing this to a multiply, we'll have 3 over a times by 1 over 2. And then we just multiply our numerators and denominators and we'll get 3 times 1, which is 3, and then a times 2, which is 2a. Now here we're just jumping up the difficulty here. Well, it looks difficult, but it's not really. Now with this one, all we need to do is factorize. So a lot of the times here, never expand. That just always makes it more confusing. You always want to factorize to be able to simplify algebraic fractions. So we look and simplify where we can. So y squared minus y, we can factorize that to y bracket y minus 1. Y minus 2, we can't do anything with that, so that's going to stay as y minus 2. Times by 3y minus 6, so that can simplify to 3y minus 2. And 4y minus 4 will factorize to 4y minus 1. Now this y minus 2 at the bottom here that doesn't have the brackets around it, we can actually write this with brackets because it's like we've timesing it all by 1. Okay, so some of you may prefer to write it that way. Now when we're timesing here, we can put them together if we want, but because there's only times in between all the terms, we just have to look for what's common. So we've got a y minus 2 on the top and a y minus 2 on the bottom. We can only cancel, remember, if it's on the top and the bottom. Then we've got a y minus 1 on the top and a y minus 1 on the bottom, so they will also cancel. So we're going to end up with y times 3 on the numerator, which is 3y, and 1 times 4 on the denominator, which is just 4. So remember, to cancel, everything has to be multiplied. So when we have things in brackets with pluses and minuses, we kind of don't look at the pluses and minuses then because we have brackets. So because we have brackets, it makes it a whole term. And now because the brackets are multiplied by everything, we can then do the cancellation. And then F, similar idea. So we want to factorise, and we've also got to divide. So for me, I would always get rid of the divide first before I do anything else. And then once I've done that, so I've changed it to a times and flipped the second fraction, then I'm going to factorise. So we get 5n minus 4 on the top, all divided by 4, times by 3 over, and that will be 2, and in brackets n minus 4. Now once again, everything's timesing, which means that n minus 4 on the top and the bottom can cancel. And we're going to have 5 times 3 on the numerator, which is 15, and 4 times 2 on the denominator, so that our answer is 15 over 8. And that is multiplying and dividing fractions. So just remember, when you get to those more difficult ones, you normally have to factorise to be able to then simplify.